Good evening and welcome to the final presentation of our series of African Bird Fair virtual talks with BirdLife South Africa in partnership with MSC Cruises. My name is Christina Hagen and I will be your host this evening. The African Bird Fair has been a fixture in the birding calendar for over 10 years, and I'm sure many of you have fond memories of our gatherings at the Walter Sisulu National Botanical Gardens and the Johannesburg Zoo. But of course, in 2020, when the world shut down and we were no longer able to host live events, BirdLife South Africa pioneered an online virtual event, which was extremely well attended. In a sense, it allowed us to host the first truly African bird fair, as we had presentations and attendees from all over the continent and the world. This year, we are moving most of our activities back to an in-person format, with our event taking place this Saturday, the 22nd of July, at the Country Club Johannesburg in Woodmead. And we will again have fantastic talks, workshops, guided walks, an auction, a quiz, and a large exhibition area. But we cannot turn our backs on our virtual audience in Africa and the rest of the world, and that is where this mini series of talks was born. We've already had 2 fantastic talks, and if you missed them, they're up on our YouTube channel. Now, before we get going, I need to thank our many sponsors who have made this year's event possible. In particular, I'd like to highlight MSC Cruises, who sponsored the virtual talk series, as well as partnered with us as our headline sponsor for the in-person event. We have an excellent relationship with MSC, and those of you who've joined us on one or more of the incredible Flock at Sea trips will attest to that. Without their support and that of our other sponsors, we'd not be able to have this event. So thank you very much to all of them. Some last quick notes about the African Bird Fair before we begin. We are announcing the winners of the BirdLife South Africa photography competition this Saturday at the African Bird Fair. And while the winners of each of our 4 categories is being decided by our panel of expert judges, you can have a direct say in who wins our People's Choice Prize. Just by voting, you also stand a chance of winning a prize yourself, being a Canon PowerShot Zoom camera kit valued at 4,500 Rand, plus a straight nature hamper worth 5,000 Rand. I'll put the link for voting in the chat box. We also have an online auction, which is happening right now. You can pick up all sorts of bargains, from guided birding trips to cameras, binoculars, bird art, wine, weekends away, and more. The auction is live until Saturday, and again, linked on the African Bird Fair webpage. And lastly, you can sign up as a member of BirdLife South Africa at a heavily discounted rate using the code ABF 2023 or in person at the fair. Note that this is specific to the day of the fair, so perhaps schedule an email tonight to be sent off on Saturday. And you can stand a chance of winning a pair of Zeiss Terra 10x42 binoculars. Now, on to tonight's talk. We are very lucky to be joined by several of our partners from across Africa, and we'll have a series of short presentations from various of our partners, and they will explain to us how they're each working to protect important and iconic African sites. The panel is headed by my colleague, BirdLife South Africa's Policy and Advocacy Program Manager, Melissa Lewis. So Melissa, I'll ask you to turn on your video and introduce the rest of your panelists. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Christina, and thanks to everyone for joining us this evening. As Christina said, my name is Melissa Lewis. I'm Policy and Advocacy Program Manager at BirdLife South Africa, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined here this evening with 4 awesome humans who I have the privilege of collaborating with in the BirdLife Partnership. Ken Mwathe is joining us from Nairobi, where he works for the BirdLife International Africa Secretariat. Julia Pierini is the CEO of BirdLife Zimbabwe. She's also currently the chair of the BirdLife International Council for the Africa Partnership. Daniel Phiri is the CEO of Birdwatch Zambia. And Catherine Prinzing is joining us all the way from Sierra Leone, where she works as the communication and advocacy advisor for the Conservation Society of Sierra Leone, our BirdLife partner in that country. So all of us are involved in various types of advocacy to protect important sites in Africa. And really what we're aiming to do tonight is give you a bit of a glimpse of what BirdLife partners in Africa are doing individually and collectively to protect these sites. So as Christina said, we've got a series of presentations. The longest will be by Ken, who's going to kick things off by giving us a bit of an overview of how the partnership works together in Africa in respect of advocacy issues, and provide us with a few examples. And then we're going to have a series of shorter presentations by Julia, Daniel, and Catherine, who are going to give us some examples of the threats facing priority sites in their countries and what their organizations are doing to respond to these, and some of the lessons they've learned from this. And then I'll just wrap things up with a few final reflections and some suggestions for how listeners can help to support the partnership's advocacy work across the continent. We have pre-recorded our presentations because the truth is that we seldom make it through a call amongst the five of us without at least one of us having internet connectivity problems in our respective countries. But we will all be back online live for the Q&A after the presentations. So thanks, Christina. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that introduction of everyone. I'm just going to share the video screen. If you can just confirm for me that you can see it.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. I will, I'll start it and please enjoy.
And welcome to this talk on taking action to save Africa's iconic sites from development pressure. I'm giving a regional perspective, and by region here I mean Africa, an African perspective. My name is Ken Mwathe, a regional perspective for BirdLife International, and by region here at the Africa office in Nairobi, and I am the policy, climate, and communications coordinator. And I warmly welcome you to join us to go through this this talk today. So site casework is any action that is taken to safeguard a site that are facing serious threats, especially from damaging development. So whenever action is taken to forestall damage at a particular site, especially of an advocacy nature, then that is a site casework. And increasingly, we are seeing many sites, many IBA, important bird areas, key biodiversity areas, World Heritage sites, being mismanaged. And so effectively, mismanagement is becoming part of what site work is all about. So we look at a framework for site defense in Africa. So BirdLife in Africa comprises of 26 partners in 26 countries. And in each of these countries, the BirdLife partner, for example, we have BirdLife Zimbabwe in Zimbabwe, BirdLife South Africa in South Africa, Nature Kenya in Kenya, and others. So all these come together to form the BirdLife Africa Partnership. So on the site action area, we have the BirdLife partners have formed the African Sites Casework on Emerging Threats Task Force. This is a team that you can call the Africa Sites Defense team. So it has membership from all the partners, plus the secretariat. The secretariat is where the staff that are employed to support the partners in these 26 countries, with an office in Nairobi, an office in West Africa in Dakar, and a project office in Sao Tome and Principe. So these partners come together and form the asset, and this group is guided by a terms of reference and an engagement criteria, which I'll be talking about later. Because having so many sites that are facing so much in terms of a development pressure, you definitely need a criteria that tells you, I can intervene here and here on this and that condition. And very often we find that we draw upon the strength of the partnership. Once in a while, we have big cases in which we draw upon the strength of the partnership. The asset meets 4 times a year with a rotational chair. We currently have about 13 partners being part of the asset team. And on our radar, and the number of sites that have at one time or another had an issue and are being supported, we have about 30 to 35 of them, of those kind of sites, and 7 of them usually at least 7 of them usually have a serious case that requires concerted effort. Last year, we formed a Francophone chapter of ASSET to take care of issues in West Africa and Francophone Africa. And most recently, we formed the group decided to form the Joint Advocacy Action Task Team, which is looking at issues on a day-to-day basis, because there's so much that needs to be done. There's so much that needs to be followed up. There are letters and objections that need to be written. There's a collaboration that needs to be formed, and that is the purpose of that task team. So basically, the objectives of ASSET is to minimize damage at key biodiversity areas or important bird areas in Africa by implementing campaigns at all these different levels. If it's at national level or regional level, international levels, we get to determine the level at which the campaigns are to take place, and we take advantage of existing frameworks, global laws that protect sites, species, and habitats. So, how do we decide where to intervene? How do we decide which case to support? Conservation interest is very important. So we look at the area under threat, and then we ask ourselves, how important is this site? So if for example, it's an Alliance for Zero Extinction site, or the site has endangered or critically endangered species, then of course it becomes very important. The scale of threat, is a threat affecting a part of the site? What part of the site is being affected? What is the population of the species of interest that is under threat? So that helps us to make a decision. Imminence of threat is about how quickly, how soon it is happening. If the bulldozers are already on site, then that is very serious, and that requires immediate action. We also look at strategic and political considerations. Things that would provide precedence. For example, if there has not been mining in a national park in a particular country, and the government and a developer or investor would like to to do that. That is precedent as a setting. So so we prioritize as such cases. And then you also consider operational considerations, looking at whether other people can do what we want to do, and whether we could let others do what take action where they are strong. So how do we approach our site action or site defense? National laws are very important because they become the safeguard which our partners can use to fight threats at site level. So planning is critically important. The policies, the laws related to mining, related to agriculture, related to energy. Then there's the whole environmental and social impact assessment processes, which you try to influence, as well as strategic environmental assessment, which is a growing area across Africa. So our partners at the negotiating table, they have their ears on the ground and ready to apply any of these tools. And we have the example of the Tana River Delta Strategic Environmental Assessment there that was used to resolve a lot of issues in the Tana Delta in Kenya. Then we have international mechanisms, international conventions, international treaties that have mechanisms and processes that protect sites and species, of course, for others. The Convention on Biological Diversity, especially the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which is now the blueprint that countries and governments are using to help halt biodiversity decline across the world. So this is going to become an important an important tool in our site work. The Ramsar Convention is also key, especially where we have wetlands of international importance and wetlands in general, especially in applying the wise use principle. The Convention on Migratory Species and the family. There's a family of mechanisms there, like the African Eurasian Waterbird Agreement, among others. And there's a particular tool that's critically important, the critical site network tool that shows the migratory routes of about 300 migratory birds and where they stop and what needs to be done to protect those sites. The World Heritage Convention and the outstanding universal value criteria that helps in site protection, and so on and so forth, including international financial institutions such as IFC Performance Standard 6. This is an example of our BirdLife partners in Africa writing a statement to the World Heritage Convention and related agencies. On 16th November 2022, all 26 BirdLife Africa partners wrote this statement, very detailed, very analytical, to the World Heritage agencies, raising concerns about World Heritage sites and increasing development at these sites, increasing mismanagement, and the fact that there is need to do something. The governments have committed themselves and they need to do something to make sure that incursion into a World Heritage site is stopped. No-go commitments by developers and governments is respected. The recognition that mining, for example, is not compatible with the maintenance of the integrity of these sites, and the fact that they need better better management. This note was sent to World Heritage on the 50th anniversary of the convention, and it was well received, and it received quite a bit of coverage as well. So this is an example of the power of many. 26 partners from 26 countries speaking to governments and speaking to mechanisms that are supposed to bring to ensure that our iconic sites in Africa are protected. Going to examples, in West Africa, Ghana, we have Atiwa forests, which has been facing many problems, many challenges, especially with regards to a proposed bauxite mining. Beautiful forest, an important bird area, globally significant biodiversity area, an alliance for zero extinction, a key biodiversity area. So all the qualities, all the characteristics. But then a Chinese came to the government of Ghana with a deal to mine out the bauxite in the forest, with the promise that they would provide money for, especially for infrastructural development, up to 10 billion, but the deal was 19 billion in US dollars in total. So Arusha Ghana Wildlife Society, which GWS, who are the BirdLife partner in Ghana, came together and mobilized communities, developed position papers, carried out economic studies. So more than 15 civil society organizations. They organized petitions. There was a march by the local communities to the presidential palace. During the IUCN World Congress, there was a motion on Atiwa, calling for no damage to Atiwa, and then letters, and there were many articles in the local media, local and international media, and there has been a lawsuit ongoing against the government of Ghana. So this is one case that has gone on for more than 5 years. The court case is still ongoing, and litigation in court. There is ongoing efforts to get statements that would support the case, and of course, all the stakeholders are being engaged. And just to say that, indeed, when it comes to site action, site advocacy, site case work, there have been some successes. And I think here I highlight only two. A number of years ago, there was a proposal by the Tata Group and the government of Tanzania to invest $450 million US dollars to build a soda ash factory at Lake Natron in Tanzania, which is the most important breeding site for lesser flamingos. It's the most important breeding site for lesser flamingos in Eastern Africa, and indeed in the world. The most significant one in East Africa, where 75% of the flamingos, lesser flamingos, breed. So if anything happens to this site, then it means that 75% of the population of the species will be affected. So there was a massive campaign in Tanzania, in East Africa, in Africa, and globally to stop this investment. And after a campaign of more than 7 years, 10 years effectively, this project was stopped. Tata withdrew early, I think in the 4th or 5th year, but the government of Tanzania kept trying to get alternative investors, but they eventually did not succeed. And in 2018, they said that they were not going to go ahead with the project. And instead, there were investments in ecotourism, and there's a growing tourism effort there, targeting local communities, including beadwork for women, as in this picture here. The other example is Mabira Forest in Uganda, where 7,100 hectares of the forest were to be given to Sugar Corporation of Uganda to grow sugarcane, of course, for production of sugarcane, for production of sugar. But there was a vicious campaign, I would say. There were even street protests led by Nature Uganda, the BirdLife partner in Uganda. There were indeed, I mean, this was a very serious campaign because there were a number of deaths and injuries. But eventually, the voice of reason won the day, and the giveaway was stopped, and the forest was given back to conservation. So, some conclusions: site defense works, but it is a long-term commitment. It takes a lot of work. It takes many hands, indeed all hands on the deck to get one site saved. But site action must be from local to global. Partners play a big role, and that is where action starts, and then we move up all the way to the international level. There has to be capacity and collaboration, as these are constant needs. And we are finding that litigation is becoming an important element of casework and advocacy. But you're also seeing that there are many opportunities coming up, especially with some of the global mechanisms, like the Global Biodiversity Framework and others, that provide opportunities to better influence foresight. So thank you very much. I hope that there will be questions at the end of this. I thank you for listening.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Julia Pierini. I am the CEO of BirdLife Zimbabwe, the BirdLife international partner in Zimbabwe. And we are working regionally with our partners and continentally to address common challenges to our key biodiversity areas. Thank you. So biodiversity and the benefits it provides is fundamental to human well-being and a healthy planet. Despite ongoing efforts, biodiversity is deteriorating worldwide, and this decline is projected to continue or worsen under business as usual scenario. So we've seen that very, very clearly post-COVID. So what is happening in Zimbabwe? So Africa's key biodiversity areas, protected areas in general, are repositories of biodiversity and ecosystem services across Africa. So this is what we need to be remembering and create a lot of awareness. In many of these places, these areas are the last refuges of plant and animal species, including birds. Many are World Heritage Sites, preserving areas of outstanding universal value, and Ramsar sites. In many cases, they are a source of livelihoods to local communities. They provide water and ecosystem services and are contributing towards the Sustainable Development Goals and Africa's Agenda 2063. Unfortunately, there's an increasing trend of large infrastructure development projects and extractive industry projects, including mining, oil and gas exploration, taking place in and around these sites. So I'm just going to give a few examples in Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, we have 20 important bird and biodiversity areas, key biodiversity areas. One of them is Mumpuradona in Mubura in Shishona means water. It's a very key watershed area for the Mazarabani district. It is a key biodiversity area over 230 bird species. It's on the dike, so high levels of endemism in terms of botanical species. It is also a very important cultural heritage area. In May 2021, the Environmental Management Agency issued an EIA to mine chrome in the Muvardona key biodiversity area.
We then have the Limpopo-Munezi floodplain key biodiversity area in 2022. An EIA was issued by the Environmental Management Agency to prospect for minerals. It was very concerning about the destructive nature of the prospecting, and also further concerns in this watershed area and key biodiversity areas, the likelihood that minerals should be found. The Environmental Management Agency would issue an EIA to continue. So in terms of a changing climate, Zimbabwe drying up, it's very, very worrying that floodplains are also being impacted by mining mineral exploration. Chimanimani Biosphere Reserve and Key Biodiversity Area. Chimanimani is the area in Zimbabwe with higher levels of endemism, i.e. plants which are found, and particularly plants, but biodiversity which are found nowhere else on the planet. So the area has been battling with unlawful gold mining since 2006, and very worrying. So the mining has been curbed within the national park by the intervention of the Zimbabwe Parks and Wildlife Authority, who are trying very, very hard with very few resources, but not in other areas. So the environment is connected, the water is being polluted in other areas, affecting other biodiversity in this very, very important district. The Batoka Gorge is an iconic site. Many of you will know it because at the head is it's world renowned because of the Victoria Falls. It contains also unique ecosystem and aquatic biodiversity that's yet to be described. It is also a key refuge for cliff nesting raptors, and it's a World Heritage Site and a Ramsar site. So as BirdLife Zimbabwe, we partnered with Birdwatch Zambia, our partner in Zambia, to submit a position paper opposing the development of the proposed Batoka Gorge hydroelectric scheme. The worry is in the EIA process that often the issues that are raised in these objections are not addressed. And so very worrying that sort of an old technology is being adopted for energy, the supply of energy, where with new technologies, we would need to be looking at, for real sustainable development, looking at new technologies for energy production in Zimbabwe. So a position paper was submitted in January 2021, and then a subsequent one in October 2022, following the EIA process. Another World Heritage Site that's been impacted by, the prospect of mining, and that's the Mana Pools National Park. Very, very famous national park. World Heritage Site is also a Ramsar site. There was an application for prospective mining, oil and gas in the buffer zone of the national park, and an objection was submitted by BirdLife Zimbabwe and partnering with Birdwatch Zambia. And the reason for that is because Mana Pools, on the other side of Mana Pools, is the Lower Zambezi National Park in Zambia, which is also being impacted by copper mining. So just recently, the Ministry of Environment in Zambia and Zimbabwe have signed an MOU for a transboundary conservation area, which is really very exciting. However, there's this prospect of mining looming over both national parks and the World Heritage Site that we don't see how they can operate together. So very worrying how sectors are operating clearly in silos. So this is a very, very important area which comprises the Lower Zambezi National Park in Zambia and the Mana Pools National Park, and the Sapi and Chiwori Safari areas, which comprise the World Heritage Site. This is intact wilderness and biodiversity hotspot that encompasses the evolutionary and ecological processes that sustain life. So these areas are critically important. And thank you for listening, and I pass the word to my colleague. Thank you so much.
My name is Daniel Piri. I'll just give a presentation about the site casework and emerging threats that we've been doing in Zambia, just lessons learned and experiences from our country. So I'll just presentation outline. So I'll give just a brief about our advocacy work as BirdLife Zambia. Then speak about the challenges that we've encountered, key lessons learned, and then conclude my presentation. So basically, one of the landscapes that we have been doing advocacy work is the Kafue Flats. So much of what we have been doing recently is very, very new. Of course, looking at the imminent threat that we have. Initially, there was a mining exploration, actually two main explorations, one for gypsum and another one for geothermal power production that was happening within the Kafue Flats, basically looking at National Park. But with the application for a license for an expansion of about 26,000 hectares, we have sort of upped or increased our advocacy work in this landscape. Of course, the explorations that have been happening have been quite detrimental in themselves. The developers initially started with 300 hectares and expanded to about 1,000 hectares without following proper procedures. And of course, a few stop orders were issued by the Environmental Management Agency, ZEMA, which they did not actually heed to. Another problem is the geothermal power production. Of course, they've also been doing explorations. I would like to expand now to full-scale power production. Of course, so we're looking at problems of power lines being developed there and all sorts of things that come with geothermal power production. Also, there are copper deposits around the area, which actually threaten the sustainability and stability of this particular landscape. So those are some of the issues that we've been dealing with. So I'll speak more to the gypsum mining interventions or advocacy that we've undertaken. So what has happened so far is there was a scoping, an EIS scoping meeting that was undertaken for communities just to it's part of the processes where the developer informs the communities about the EIA and the proposed mining development and the benefits it will bring, etc. So we, in attending that meeting, we raised quite a number of pertinent issues which were not obvious to the communities in terms of the violations that this mine was bringing, but also the lack of benefits. Of course, they present it as, you know, it's going to bring these benefits and etc. But we brought some of the cases of, you know, this is the situation that has been happening. You know, they promised you this when they started the scoping, but what actually happened was the opposite. But also looking at the violations, but also the fact that their cultural heritage would actually be eroded by this particular development. Looking at the major cultural sites that would actually be destroyed within the protected area. So we raised quite a number of issues. Unfortunately, these actually arose quite a lot of interest from the communities and support for what we were advocating for. We developed a position paper, which I have put here on the right, which was submitted along with an objection letter to the Ministry of Tourism and Arts. Of course, this was done in collaboration with WWF and the Endangered Wildlife Trust, or ICF. But also we've been undertaking lobbying at various levels, of course, engaging government as well as traditional authorities. We continue to boost nature-based solutions, but also trying to enhance benefits that accrue to communities with regards to this particular protected area. As you know, the biggest argument that usually is put across by developers is that, protecting these landscapes does not actually accrue to any benefits for them, but going for mining actually, provides jobs, etc. And some communities actually fall for that and support these developments, unfortunately. Another problem that we've actually been looking at is marigold and paprika production in Lukanga swamps. Lukanga swamps is a very important IBA, just like the Kafue Flats for us. It's stopover site for more than 120 different migratory bird species. But also it houses more than 300 different bird species and a few endemics as well for Zambia. Of course, the development is production of paprika, agriculture, more than 500 hectares. More 50% of this is within the core IBA. And at the time that the EIA was being done, they had already cultivated more than 300 hectares already. So already we're looking at quite a lot of violations happening before even approvals are given. What we did here is mostly engage the financial institution that was to fund this development that they had applied to, which is the IFC. A number of engagements were undertaken and they facilitated discussions between ourselves and the developers, trying to implore them to look at a different site, an alternative site as opposed to this one, which would actually adversely affect this landscape that is already grappling with many threats, including invasive species. So we're looking at, phosphates and nitrates increasing due to fertilizer use in the landscape, exacerbating the problem of floating invasive species that we've already been dealing with as an institution in terms of restoring this landscape. And of course, we are talking about habitat destruction already with this development and many other problems that I can't cover in this short presentation. So fortunately, or it's unfortunately, they were not willing to actually look at some of the issues that we were proposing, which led to the IFC deciding not to go ahead with funding this particular development. We would have hoped for the IFC to fund this development because then it gives us a bit more room to actually influence in terms of mitigation measures, of course, because they had already been given the permit by the government to actually go ahead with this particular development. Lower Zambezi case is a very well, of course, quite a lot of information has been shared around this across Southern Africa. Of course, there's a prospective mine, open pit mine there that was approved for development. Initially, the EIA was rejected by the Environmental Management Agency, but their decision was actually overturned by the Minister of Environment at the time. So CSOs came together, including ourselves, to actually intervene, trying to engage the government. When it was not successful, we actually went the litigation way. Unfortunately, it also did not yield the intended result after years of battling it out in court. Of course, we had a change in government and we had hoped that they would actually overturn the decision by the previous minister, but this wasn't the case, unfortunately. A case was filed by some colleagues in the Constitutional Court citing gross violations of the Constitution with regards to handling this case when the litigation was happening. This process is still ongoing, but of course we also wrote along with other CSOs to the government to withdraw the license, of course, due to massive violations and irregularities that we had observed happening within the, by the developers after they were given a go-ahead in 2021 by the courts. Of course, a compliance order was issued around May this year by ZEMA due to these violations that had been observed. And of course, civil society organizations marched in June to protest against the development and trying to just implore the minister to cancel that license that had been issued in Lower Zambezi. So just to share a few paper clippings of some, so you see here the mining being halted, shared on the news position paper was initially submitted, press statement on the issue, and then some litigation documents there, and of course different objections written to Zemo on various issues and raising their concerns, campaign, and all other avenues that we actually explored during this process. What we've learned so far is that science is very important. It is important to put your facts together before engaging in these issues, because of course these developers come prepared with opposing actually arguments. We are stronger together. We need to work together with other organizations to actually have a strong voice, and you know, if we are to be successful. Building capacity also at different levels is very important. One of those is, of course, our lawyers. There's quite a big void there that exists. We don't have environmental lawyers in Zambia. And this is a big gap that actually exists that needs filling. We've seen a lot of litigation processes not going anywhere, mainly because our lawyers are usually incompetent. Capacity building also with the regulators is very important, needs to happen. Many of them are just do not actually have the tools and capacity to do their work. Not that they're not dedicated, unfortunately. So legal and policy framework also needs to be aligned. There's quite a lot of gaps and different legislation, pieces of legislation not speaking to each other. You have the Minerals Act not speaking to the Environmental Act and all sorts of things. Networking is also important. Of course, we need to be able to influence financial institutions to actually invest in developments that are actually sustainable, and not any developments as I gave an example with the IFC. So thank you very much. Now I end my presentation here.
Hello everyone, my name is Katrin Prinzing and I'm working with the Conservation Society of Sierra Leone since about 2 years now as the Communication and Advocacy Advisor. I will present to you some of the challenges and hopes we have regarding our conservation efforts here. And as you can see at the title, I would like to concentrate a bit on the communication and advocacy point of view. Before I come to our topic, our KBAs and how we try to protect them and what we are doing about communication advocacy there, I would like to introduce you very shortly the organization itself, the Conservation Society of Sierra Leone, CSSL, as I'm sure not all of you have heard of it. We are the oldest environmental organization in the country. We were established in 1986. Our main mission is to promote the sustainable and wise use of our natural resources, and we are also focusing on fighting for sustainable development and livelihoods of people, because in a country like Sierra Leone, many people still depend on the forest, they depend on wood to cook, they depend on the fish, they depend on the mangroves, so it's very difficult to tell them to protect nature and conserve nature without giving them alternative livelihoods which prepare them for a better future. And to reach our goals, we are working with national and international organizations. Of course, we work with government and other NGOs, and I'm sure you already guessed, we are the BirdLife International partner in Sierra Leone. I decided not to bother you with too much text, so I brought you some photos from Sierra Leone. As I said in the beginning, in Sierra Leone, many people depend on the forest, on the mangrove wood. They cook with wood or they produce charcoal to sell it and use the charcoal for cooking. So this is, of course, a big problem, especially in the mangroves. You can see it on the right photo on the top. That's all mangroves which are cut and which will be processed for firewood or also charcoal. Of course, we don't want to stop people from cooking, but we want to stop people from illegal logging and we want to stop people from illegal timber logging in the forest and commercial logging. So, as I said, the problem is people are really depending on it. They get their daily income through the charcoal burning, through the logging. And as long as we don't offer them alternatives to gain their income, to gain their livelihood, they can and will not stop the logging. That's why some part of our work always focuses on the alternative livelihood options. So you see, for example, this lady, she's a cocoa farmer in the Gula landscape. And through one of the projects we are working with, also with support from the UK partner, BirdLife International, RSPB, we managed to give trainings to women mainly, but also men, to cocoa farmers, so that they can improve their farming. They got better seeds, they get stable prices from us, and we also give them easy access to markets, so that for them, their income is safe and they don't have to encroach further in the forest. We are educating and training people so that they do their own forest management without using new forest, which is still untouched forest. So this is one way how we respond to the need of the people of income through forest. Another big challenge is mining, which is going on in many different ways. Like we have sand mining, gold mining, stone mining. This case, for example, shows a gold mining case at Lake Saint-Fond, one of our project sites. We are working there because Lake Saint-Fond, you can see it on the picture down there. The green is the lake. It's the Lake Saint-Fond means green lake because nearly all the surface is covered with plants. We are working there because it's an important bird area for migratory birds, but also there are some endemic species, for example, like the emerald starling. We managed to stop the gold mining last year. All 10 mining sites were stopped. We really celebrated this as a big, big success. We were very happy about it. This was due to like long-term relationship building with the community people, with local authorities. We did a lot of educational work, health awareness, and a lot of communication and advocacy has been done to really bring people to stop mining. But unfortunately, by the beginning of the year, some foreign companies, Chinese companies, started mining there. And this made people to start mining again also, because they started to think that we only stopped them to mine, but not the foreign companies. So my colleagues, they were nearly attacked physically by the community people when they went there. We are perceived as enemies now again. So, of course, the communication advocacy had to chip in immediately to restart the relationship work. Of course, it never stopped, but it's not always the same intense way it is. So we had to nearly start again from the bottom to build up the relationships again, to explain people why are we here, why are we protecting the nature. It is also for their health and for clean water for the communities, and to explain them again how dangerous the mining is for them and also for the cultural heritage sites in the lake. So we are hoping we're in a good way now, and we are hoping that we managed to stop the mining in all the 5 sites again. And we already work with local authorities, with the police, with the district level to get the law enforced and to hopefully continue to protect the beauty of Lake Saint-Fond. Yeah, to be perceived as the enemy is not only happening in Sierra Leone, not only Lake Saint-Fond, I'm sure all of us know it. Conservation is sometimes perceived as blocking and slowing down development. This is also happening around the Western Area Peninsula forest. You can see pictures here. The picture on the bottom, it shows the hills around Freetown, which have been full of forest like 3-4 years ago. Even me, I'm only here since 2 years, but the forest is going so fast. It's incredible. Because people start to construct, people log, people sell the land, and nobody's stopping them. And that's actually one of the biggest challenges here. We have environmental laws, we have international agreements, but we don't really see real commitment from the government, from the political parties to really enforce the law. And I think this is very, very dangerous because you see, for example, the other picture, it shows the water catchment area for Freetown. It's the Guma Dam. And we can see on satellite pictures that the surface of the water is really getting smaller and smaller each year, even though the rain is not getting less. So we can already see and feel what happens when the surface of the forest is getting smaller or so. Yeah, so just to sum up, the biggest challenges for us, I already mentioned most of them. Like one big challenge is that conservation doesn't generate fast income, but only income in the long run. So we really have to communicate people, explain people very well why it's still so important to protect the nature and conserve nature for the future and for their future income, for their livelihood. And the other biggest challenge for us here is really there is no real commitment from political parties. Then the different political departments, they don't really work together, the different ministries. Often you have the feeling they don't really communicate. And I think one goal of us has to be to bring them together so that they design their plans and strategies together, because sometimes they work against each other, what is not good for all of us. And so this is one of the things we are trying to implement now. Yeah, so we want to improve our relationships with the other side, like the mining companies, oil companies, the ministries of infrastructure, but we also want to combine them. We want to give trainings to them, to the MPs, but also to other people who work for environmental work at the ministries. So on the one hand, that they know the international agreements, that they know the regulations. I think not all of them really know the regulations. And also to bring them together, to plan together, and to plan in an environmental friendly way. And of course, we also have to focus on the awareness building of community people so that they are able to protect themselves, to advocate for themselves, like, for example, at Lake Saint-Fond, that they know their rights, that they know the rights of the foreign companies, and they themselves can go to the police, to the local authorities, to empower them to protect their own environment by themselves. Yeah, thank you for your attention. 10 minutes is not enough to give you an introduction to Sierra Leone and our work, but I hope you have some ideas now. We are very happy. If you want to have more information, just ask questions later, send me an email, visit our website. We are very happy to answer all your questions, and you're all invited to come and visit us one day.
Good evening, everyone. Once again, I'm going to be wrapping up this evening's panel with just a few reflections on the relevance of and common themes from what's been said tonight, and then I'll give you a bit of a sense of what some of our future priorities are, and I'll end by highlighting a few of the ways in which you, our audience, can help the BirdLife Partnership's advocacy efforts moving forward. Right, so I just wanted to start by saying that I do appreciate that the majority of tonight's viewers probably are not from the countries that have been discussed this evening, and some of you may be asking yourselves, well, why should I care about threats to nature in another country? Well, I'd argue that there are many reasons, to name but a few. We do need to remember the fact that ecologically destructive activities in one country can have transboundary impacts on others, and I think that Julia and Daniel gave a great example of this in their discussion of the copper mining in the Lower Zambezi National Park and its potential implications for minor pools across the border. Now, the species that rely on many of these sites are, of course, themselves transboundary, with the result that conservation efforts in one country can quite easily be undermined by failures to protect these species' habitats in other parts of their range. And as has been emphasized repeatedly, the sites discussed this evening have been recognized for their international significance. For instance, some of their designation as wetlands of international importance and or as World Heritage Sites. And then I think that we do also just need to remain cognizant of the political reality that governments do look to examples set by other countries, especially within the same region, and that a bad precedent set in one country can quite easily become a bad precedent for the region. And these are just some of the reasons that we at BirdLife South Africa consider it important to support partners across the continent, and for which we'd encourage you to do likewise. Now, as is evident from tonight's presentations, BirdLife partners and indeed other conservation organizations face similar challenges across the continent. And I just wanted to reiterate several of these. First of all, we've seen quite a bit of discussion tonight of the problem with the siloed approach in decision making by different government departments. Unfortunately, coupled with that is oftentimes a lack of political clout of environmental ministries relative to other ministries, such as those responsible for mineral resources and energy. I think all of us on the call have oftentimes being confronted with this increasingly polarized narrative of environment on the one hand versus socio-economic development on the other, which of course is hugely problematic because it fails to take into account the multitude of important ecosystem services with which natural areas provide people. Many of us often have to grapple with poor quality of environmental impact assessment reports, inadequate public participation as part of those EIA processes, so the public participation just being treated as a tick box exercise, lack of enforcement of legal requirement by the authorities, in some instances because of lack of capacity, and others because of lack of political will. Something that we haven't really discussed this evening, but is becoming an increasing challenge globally, is proposals to weaken legal requirements. We've also seen various examples this evening of failures to comply with countries' international conservation commitments under various international instruments. We also quite commonly see problems with financiers failing to apply international best practice to their lending. And then, of course, capacity constraints are a perpetual problem for NGOs and indeed other key stakeholders, such as communities and even authorities themselves. So in the face of these challenges, as Ken highlighted, within the BirdLife Partnership, we definitely benefit from the power of many, both in terms of sharing ideas and lessons to support one another, and in terms of collective action to amplify our messages across the continent and to decision makers at the international level. So as Ken said, ASET did recently establish a dedicated task team on joint advocacy action. I think everyone on this call does sit on that task team. And we're in the process of identifying a number of opportunities and strategies for future joint advocacy. I just wanted to highlight a couple of those. So as Ken explained, last year, African BirdLife partners did develop and publish a joint statement on threats to natural World Heritage sites. Now coming up in September, we have the next meeting of the World Heritage Committee, and we certainly will be using this as an opportunity to publish additional advocacy communications with a view to draw wider attention to the concerns and the collective position articulated in that joint statement. It's also significant that in 2025, Zimbabwe will be hosting the next Ramsar Convention Conference of the Parties, which is going to involve all governments that are parties to the convention. So with a large international event of that nature being held here in Southern Africa, we have a really important opportunity to spotlight the multifaceted values associated with wetlands, draw attention to the threats that they face, and put pressure on governments in this region to address those threats, and in doing so to comply with their commitments under the convention. Now, despite the benefits of working in the BirdLife Partnership, the reality is that we are still a relatively small group of people, and the truth is we really do need as much help as we can get. So on that note, I really implore everyone in tonight's audience to consider becoming advocates for nature yourselves. And there's a myriad of ways in which you can do this. A really important way is just by helping us to raise awareness through discussions in your community, by sharing advocacy materials on social media, signing on to petitions and open letters, etc. Help us to raise awareness not only about the threats that these areas face, but also about the importance of the areas themselves and the critical ecosystem services that they provide to people. Please do also alert us to threats to important sites that come to your attention. Don't assume that we're aware of all of them, but please do also understand that we don't necessarily have the capacity to become directly involved in fighting each and every threat. And on that note, I'd really encourage you to consider becoming more directly involved yourself, whether it's through commenting on EIA and spatial planning processes, alerting the authorities to unlawful activities that you become aware of and putting pressure on them to respond to those non-compliances, putting pressure on companies and financiers that are based in your country to act sustainably and responsibly, not only domestically, but also abroad. And engaging in these kinds of activities, we encourage you to not go it alone, but collaborate with like-minded people, look at opportunities to partner with NGOs, etc. It would also be remiss of me not to reiterate that unfortunately conservation NGOs across the continent are pretty profoundly hamstrung by significant resource constraints. So if you are concerned about the challenges faced in a particular country and you have the means to do so, I would encourage you to consider making a donation to the local BirdLife partner. Their websites do typically provide information on how to go about doing so. And then I'd also encourage you to stay inspired by spending time in nature. And when you do so, I'd encourage you to, of course, support and utilize sustainable tourism services, and to submit your bird atlasing data, which provides really important information that we can make use of in responding to EIA's spatial planning processes, etc. And then a final word of advice, please remember that there are success stories. And I understand the temptation to feel despondent and that the odds are stacked overwhelmingly against us. But as Ken highlighted, there are examples of major advocacy successes to the benefit of nature. And these have typically resulted from multi-pronged approaches involving many different stakeholders at many different levels. So success is possible. Every voice counts. So please join us in using yours. Thanks very much for your attention, and thanks as always to the RSPB for funding BirdLife South Africa's policy and advocacy work.
Thank you very much to all our panelists. That was a fantastic run through of all the very hard work that you are all doing. So thank you very much. Let me just stop sharing, and please join me on the screen, and we can go through some questions. So those of you in the audience, please do pop your questions in the Q&A box. If you are watching us on Facebook Live, you can also put your questions in the comments, and I will try and get to those as well. So thanks again to all our panelists. That was great to get an overview of what everyone's doing. So let's just take a look in the Q&A. We have one question directly for Ken. I'm not sure if he's there. If you're having issues with your camera, then just please let us know if you are still there.
I am here, but I'm trying to get my camera on.
Okay, good. We
It's
can
actually on, but it's not showing the picture.
Ah, that's very, very strange, but at least we can hear you. one of the questions is that in some countries, the IBAs or KBAs, so for the rest of the audience, those are important bird areas or key biodiversity areas, are not regularly monitored, which makes it hard to know the current threat levels of the area. Does that not bias the selection of your threatened sites? And how do you encourage countries to monitor more regularly?
Yeah, thank you very much, Brooke Tawit, for that question. Indeed, we have a challenge of regular IBA monitoring in some countries. So that makes it difficult when it comes to knowing where the issues are. But incidentally, even where partners are not doing regular IBA monitoring, when there is an issue, they always make a point of raising it. So in some way, the asset team gets to know there is a problem in country A, and that problem is A, B, C, D, and the partner would like us to intervene and to support. So very often, we encourage the partner to also go and fill the IBA KBA form, post on the World Bird Database, so that the pressure threat levels can be recorded. So in recent months, we have seen enhanced effort to get partners fill the basic information about their IBAs, and we are seeing that across many countries now. We have a new IBA KBA officer, so we are actively encouraging them with or without problems to ensure that at least once a year or once every number of years, that data, form is filled and uploaded. Yeah, so I think that's the answer to that question. So the issue of bias really, I don't think it arises, because in most countries, whenever an issue arises, as I said, the partners do let us know that there's a problem.
Yeah, again, that shows the value of the partnership and having good relationships with stakeholders and communities in the countries that you're working in. I think the BirdLife Partnership does a great job of that. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything to Ken's answer. No?
Yes, can I jump in?
Oh yeah, Julia, go ahead.
Yeah, so as the BirdLife Partnership, we are quite connected. So we have the different platforms where we communicate together, and we share challenges, or we reach out to each other, both at a regional level and at a continental level. So there are different opportunities. And I think one of the most important things, because none of us are very big organizations, so we tend to be small in terms of sustainability to sustain ourselves, but we are very well connected within the BirdLife Partnership. So, and the asset group that Ken was describing is just that, is to bring us closer together and to assist us together with the partners that we're also working with in country. So Daniel was describing, many of their advocacy, lobbying, so they're not doing it alone. So the critical thing is to understand is that these sites often, these are key biodiversity areas, very important sites, World Heritage sites that are being impacted by big development and mining, and the developers have got huge amounts of money. So, so the importance of coming together is really critically important, which is why the asset group within the BirdLife Partnership, working together, we have to come together and fight this to save these iconic sites. You know, there is no other way. And we need to pool not only our resources in terms of finances, but also, you know, who does what, who can do, where's your strength lie? And this is what's working quite well that we found in the asset group, so BirdLife South Africa, we can't all afford a policy officer. So many of our organizations don't have a policy officer that is clued up on legislation, and BirdLife South Africa comes to the rescue and with Melissa, and it works a gem. So we produce position papers and we bring in the law because we've got that assistance. So that coming together and pooling our different strengths is really very critical, because it's like, we are the smallies and there's the big developer with huge amounts of money that is enticing government, because our governments are just looking for development because it's just money there. You know, developer comes along and it could be a very dubious developer just wanting to make a fast buck, which is generally the case, and not looking at the ecological impact of what is actually happening. So it's development for the sake of making money and not looking at future, in terms of water, in terms of biodiversity, in terms of sustainability. There's no plan at all. And the EIA process is completely flawed. So coming together is really very important. And the IBAs and KBAs, we all know what's happening. So they may be insufficient, monitoring to the level that we want, but we all know exactly what's happening. So, and we go for the important sites, and all the KBAs, IBAs, KBAs are the important sites. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Julia. There is one question that Pat Nurse has put in the chat box, asking about threats to the Okavango Delta from prospecting in the catchment, especially in Angola. I don't know if any of you know anything about that. Melissa, I see you've unmuted. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of first go at answering that. So we are definitely keeping an eye on the oil and gas exploration threat from Recon Africa and the Okavango Basin. So in that respect, well, as you'll be aware, it's an issue that has gained a lot of international attention. There are a lot of organizations such as Rewild playing a leading role in the opposition to those activities, as well as local community groups, etc. But we have been endeavoring to support those advocacy efforts where possible. So, for instance, from the BirdLife South Africa side, we did come on board as a co-sponsor for an IUCN resolution dealing with Okavango. We did comment directly and submit direct objections on the EIA for proposed 2D seismic surveys in relation to that application. And then as a partnership, we've been discussing the issue through assets and have had various joint communications surrounding that. In the lead up to the last World Heritage Committee meeting, we had quite a lot of advocacy communication surrounding that particular threat. And then just earlier this year, on African World Heritage Day, or the week of African World Heritage Day, the BirdLife Africa Secretariat did publish an opinion piece on that matter. And I don't know if Ken wants to add to that, or if any of the other folk on the call who've been involved in this issue would like to comment. Thanks very much for that question.
Yeah, I think Melissa, you've said everything. I think the taking advantage of the World Africa Heritage Day was a big thing, because it helped bring up the issues around Okavango and other World Heritage sites across the continent. So recently, the RECON, there was a report that RECON was pausing its exploration, but again, there were contradictory reports that they had, they had received approvals for a bigger area to explore for oil. So it's a bit confusing, but it's something that we are keeping our eye on. And thanks to BirdLife South Africa, who are keeping a close eye on what is happening down there.
Hi, if I could also add something. What is really important about the Okavango, that you can see at a regional level, the same things is happening in different areas. So Okavango is a World Heritage Site. Mana Pools is a World Heritage Site. So oil and gas exploration in Okavango, oil and gas exploration in Mana Pools on the Zambezi. So what is the problem? The EIA process is flawed on both sides. So you're seeing this, the same issues are arising in all these iconic sites. So how do we address them? So you take a step back and you look at, what are the actions that we can take that will not only just, that we're not just being reactive to every site that happens, but what is the root cause and how can we address it at a national level, but also at a regional level, at a SADC level? So bring to the attention of SADC. Have you seen that in the World Heritage Sites, there is, and the common denominator is the EIA process and the lack of meaningful engagements. So we're looking at not just being reactive at each individual site, but also at looking, how do we fix the problem? Because it's not only it's at a continental level, and we seems to be the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. Thanks very much for those answers. I'm glad to hear that we are keeping our eye on the Okavango issue and all the issues that we brought up in this webinar. And now there's just one more question. Well, there's two questions in the Q&A. One of them from Paula is how concerned citizens get involved in saving our natural areas, and I think Melissa did a wonderful job of answering that in her presentation. So I will move on to Rose's question, asking, and I don't know if this is too big a topic to answer in the short time we have available to us now, because I know it's getting late. But Rose is asking about the fact that developer pays to produce the EIA, and isn't that a problem? Shouldn't this be changed? Melissa, I don't know if you want to answer that, or anyone else wants to answer that, but maybe we can just keep the answer short, and knowing that this is a much bigger topic.
I can respond to that, Christine. I also just wanted to give a brief response to Paolo's question as well, because even though I realize I did rush through a few ways in which citizens can get involved, I also recognize that it's easy to say get directly involved and comment on these processes, etc. But it's harder said than done, especially if you don't have an understanding of those processes. So I do want to take this opportunity to highlight that at least for South Africa, BirdLife South Africa has compiled a public participation guideline, which is available on our website, to try and help concerned citizens to become directly involved in these processes. And it's definitely something that we're going to be working on refining and elaborating in the future. So if you've got specific questions, if particular types of resources would be useful to you and you're not sure where to find them, please do just drop me an email. And then, yes, in terms of the developer paying for the EIA, that's indeed a massive problem in many countries. And look, I certainly don't want to accuse all environmental assessment practitioners of being biased. I have come across some that have a lot of integrity, but unfortunately, we often do come across consultants who do little to veil their bias, and it's very obvious that their principal objective is to get the development authorized. And so yes, I mean, I fully agree that is an area that is just calling for legislative reform. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else would like to add to that.
Anyone else want to add anything?
Yes, I wanted to comment about I think there was a point by Vikash about ecosystem valuation, and the fact that conservation community is either slow or unable to do ecosystem valuation of sites. Our experience is that when you are in a position to do some sort of valuation, it brings a lot of value to the additional tools and firepower to a campaign. Both the Mabira and the Lignaton campaigns, we were lucky to find some funding to get a consultant to do the evaluations, and they added a lot into our arguments. But always remember that even if you're not able to do the evaluation, there is a precautionary principle that says the inability, the lack of information, the fact that you do not have complete information should not be an excuse for not taking appropriate action. So we know that there are things that cannot be valued. You can have the best scientists, but there are things that you'll never be able to put pounds or shillings or rand or whatever currency. So I think those arguments should always be at the back of should be our backup. But as and when we are able to do some valuation, I think it becomes a very good tool for our arguments.
Absolutely, and I fully agree with you saying that the lack of knowledge shouldn't hinder us from not protecting or not doing the things that we need to do. So yes, I absolutely agree. Daniel, I see you've unmuted.
Valuation studies also are very contextual, so you can't do them beforehand. So you need to do them, it depends on the situation that you're actually dealing with. So, the context is very important as well. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think we're going to leave it there for this evening. Just to, I see Ian Barber, who is also part of the BirdLife family and our partner development officer. Just also adding to the conversation about the EIA process, saying that a better approach would be for the developer to pay for the EIA, but they don't get to choose who does the work, and therefore they can't influence the process so easily. And Ian doesn't know of anywhere that follows that approach. Yeah, I agree. That would be a much better way of doing it, but I don't know if we're going to get that change implemented, but maybe that's something we can work on. So I think, yeah, we'll leave it there. I don't see any more questions. There have just been some nice comments in the chat, complimenting you all on your presentations and thanking you for all your hard work, which I echo wholeheartedly. And I would like to urge everyone to remember Melissa's final slides about thinking about the successes and not allowing all the work that does still need to be done to get you down. We are making progress, and we do have some successes. And if we continue to work together, I have no doubt that we'll have many more in the future. So thank you very much again to our panel, and thank you to our audience for sticking it out to the end. And I hope that we will see many of you at the African Bird Fair on Saturday. So thank you very much, and good night.